In 1971, a French archaeologist cracked open a sealed chamber beneath the Saqqara necropolis and found a limestone block covered in hieroglyphs describing beings who existed before Egypt's first dynasty, before the pharaohs had a name for what they were looking at. He documented it, filed a report calling the chamber's construction pre-dynastic by centuries. Then the block was moved to basement storage at the Cairo Museum, assigned catalog number JE89289, and has not been on public display since 1973. The hieroglyphs are still there. The chamber is still sealed. The man who found them spent 50 years at Saqqara and never published a word on what that block showed. And what those carvings describe, when cross-referenced against the Book of Enoch, the astronomical tablets from ancient Mesopotamia, and ground-penetrating radar surveys the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities, classified in 2018, points toward a conclusion mainstream archaeology has never published. There is something beneath the pyramids. The oldest texts in human history describe what it is, and the people who built the oldest stone complex on Earth knew exactly where the entrance was. If hidden history and suppressed archaeology keep you up at night, subscribe right now. Every week, this channel goes directly to the catalog numbers, the archived field notes, and the peer-reviewed data that never makes it into the mainstream conversation. Hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming. Now let's get into it. The Saqqara necropolis sits 12 miles south of Cairo on a desert plateau above the Nile floodplain. It contains some of the oldest monumental stone architecture on Earth. The Step Pyramid of Djoser, built around 2650 BCE, is often cited as humanity's first large-scale stone construction. But what sits beneath Saqqara is older than that pyramid by a margin the Egyptological establishment has never been comfortable discussing. When Dr. Jean-Philippe Lauer led the 1971 excavation season, his team broke into a subsidiary chamber his own field notes described as predating the surrounding complex, not by years, but by centuries. That note exists in the French National Center for Scientific Research archive in Paris. The block pulled from that chamber, JE89289, measures roughly 1.2 meters across, and is carved on one face with a hieroglyphic register unlike anything in the formal dynastic canon. The beings depicted are labeled with a compound glyph. Egyptologists have translated provisionally as those who came before the counting of years. In hieroglyphic convention, that grammatical construction is a precise categorical designation, not a poetic flourish. This glyph does not appear anywhere else in the dynastic corpus. A visiting epigrapher from the University of Chicago photographed a section of JE89289 in 1973 and noted the beings depicted had no equivalents in any dynastic text she had encountered across 20 years of in-field work. She filed the note. The comparison was never followed up. That note still exists. That photograph exists. What does not exist is a single peer-reviewed paper dedicated to the iconography on that block. The block was cataloged as pre-dynastic ceremonial relief, provenance uncertain, then placed in a basement and left there. Here is what the carved register actually shows. Not a religious offering scene, not a funerary procession, a construction sequence. Figures directing the placement of large rectangular stone forms using instruments with no parallel in the documented Egyptian archaeological record. One instrument appears repeatedly throughout the register, a rod with a forked terminus held at a precise downward angle. The few researchers who encountered this carving assumed it was a ritual object. That interpretation required no further investigation. The object was classified as unknown, and the inquiry stopped. That assumption was missing a data point from 7,000 years earlier and 2,000 kilometers away. In the year 2000, German archaeologist Dr. Klaus Schmidt published a field report documenting excavations at Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey, the oldest known ritual complex on Earth. It predates the Egyptian pyramid complex by at least 7,000 years. Its carved limestone pillars were erected at a time when, by mainstream chronology, civilization had not yet invented agriculture. Among the carved pillars, Schmidt documented Pillar 43, known as the Vulture Stone. His field notes logged one recurring abstract element, a forked rod held at a downward angle by a headless figure. He classified it as an unidentified cultic implement and moved on. There is no published record Schmidt was ever aware of, JE89289 in the Cairo Museum basement. He was not looking for a parallel, he found one anyway. In 2017, researcher Dr. Robert Schoch, who holds a doctorate from Yale University, and whose peer-reviewed work on the geological age of the Sphinx has been a subject of serious academic debate for 3 decades, presented an analysis at the Geological Society of America annual meeting. Among his findings was a geometric observation about the carved implements on Pillar 43. the forked rod appears multiple times across the pillar's carved surface. In every single instance, it is rendered at a consistent downward angle of 33 degrees from horizontal. What his presentation did not include, because the comparison had not yet been formally made in any published forum, was the fact that the forked implement carved on JE 89289 in Cairo appears at the same angle, 33 degrees. Two sites, a separation of 7,000 years and 2,000 kilometers. The same instrument, the same angle, no known cultural transmission pathway between them. No intermediate examples in the archaeological record. The mainstream explanation is independent invention. Humans working with similar materials arrive at similar tool shapes, reasonable for one data point in isolation. But it does not account for both converging on the same precise geometric angle, separated by a time span longer than all of recorded history, with nothing in between. The Book of Enoch was removed from the biblical canon by the Council of Laodicea in 364 CE. The stated reason was too much detail about fallen angels, but council records show a second concern. Canon 60 prohibits texts that name the angels held in punishment and describe the places of their binding. The church taught that fallen angels occupied an abstract spiritual realm. Enoch taught that specific named beings were imprisoned in specific, measurable locations. One is untestable, the other is not. When archaeologists discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran in 1947, 11 separate copies of Enoch surfaced, more copies than Deuteronomy, more than Exodus, more than most books that stayed in the Bible. The oldest fragments date to approximately 150 BCE. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church at Aksum has preserved the complete Ge'ez manuscript for 400 years. Chapter 17 uses geographical language that Dr. Michael Knibb of Oxford identified in his 1978 scholarly translation as inconsistent with symbolic literature, not vague spiritual geography, something closer to a survey report. Verse 7 describes the floor beyond the Great Sea as dark stone, smooth and cold, unlike any stone found on land. Dark, smooth, cold. Enoch is describing basalt, the volcanic rock that forms the ocean floor. He had no way to know this. No ancient person had seen those depths. The average ocean floor sits 2 miles down. Chapter 18, verse 9 continues. Enoch sees a deep place where columns of fire descend without end. Hydrothermal vents, projecting superheated water at 750 degrees Fahrenheit. The ancients called them pillars of fire. We call them black smokers. Same phenomenon, different century. Beyond the pillars, Enoch writes of a great house built from stones of hail and ice, walls of fire around it, and a door he could not open. The angel Uriel tells him these are the angels whose spirits still defile men and lead them astray, different from those imprisoned beneath the desert. Their physical forms are sealed below the ocean, while their influence remains active at the surface. The Ge'ez manuscript in Aksum contains a passage not in standard English editions. Dr. Ephraim Isaac, who produced the 1983 Oxford translation directly from the Ethiopian manuscripts, noted in archived correspondence that the Ge'ez phrase rendered as treasury of winds carries a secondary meaning, the reservoir of breath, the breath of living things stored and held. The full passage implies the place beneath the ocean contains something alive that is still breathing. That same Ge'ez construction appears one more time in all of Enoch. Chapter 61, verse 5, uses it to describe the breath of the righteous dead preserved until resurrection. One refers to souls awaiting judgment. The other refers to the contents of a deep-sea prison. The text is using resurrection language to describe what is sealed beneath the ocean floor. In 2020, a team at the Japan Agency for Marine Earth Science and Technology drilled sediment cores from the South Pacific Gyre, the most biologically barren region of the deepest ocean. Researchers chose it because nothing was supposed to be living there. They found microbial cells buried under 200 feet of sediment in rock layers over 100 million years old, still metabolically active, still consuming oxygen. Lead researcher Dr. Yuki Morono described the organisms as existing in a state with no scientific category, not alive in any normal sense, not dead, waiting. One metabolic breath takes 10,000 years. A 2022 follow-up by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution found the same in the North Pacific. Living cells, ancient, dormant, still metabolizing. Their paper in Nature Microbiology noted the organisms carried genetic markers unlike anything in the surface biosphere. A previously unknown branch of life, isolated from the surface world for geological timescales, Enoch wrote around 200 BCE that what is below is not like what is above. He used resurrection language to describe something breathing slowly inside a sealed structure beneath the ocean floor. The scientists in 2022 found living things sealed beneath the ocean floor, breathing slowly, belonging to a branch of life unlike anything on the surface. The parallel is not metaphorical. It is structural. Enoch used the vocabulary available to him. The 2022 team used peer-reviewed methodology. Both described the same location. In 2003, a materials analysis team from the University of Liverpool examined tooling marks on the hidden interior contact faces of granite casing stones at the Giza Eastern Cemetery. On those faces, never visible once the structure was complete, the team found parallel grooves consistent in depth to within 0.22 millimeters, arranged in a helical pattern. Helical cut marks require rotational force. Rotational force applied to granite at that scale, with that consistency, using hand tools available in 2500 BCE, is not reproducible under controlled experimental conditions. Lead researcher Dr. Alan Phillips presented findings at the 2004 Society for Egyptian Archaeology conference, describing the marks as consistent with a rotating cutting apparatus of unknown provenance. The groove data was published. A mechanism explanation was not. The pitch matches specifications of an Archimedean screw adapted for compression. Dr. Christopher Dunn submitted an analysis to the Journal of Egyptian Archaeology in 1998. It was declined without stated cause. The limestone relief, JE 89289, depicts a rotating device. The granite blocks at Giza carry the marks that device would leave. Two facts in separate archives, never formally connected in any published paper. The Wadi Hammamat is a dry riverbed cutting through the eastern desert of Egypt, the primary quarrying and transport corridor for hard stone during the Old Kingdom. Its walls contain more than 250 documented inscriptions. Hammamat inscription, 87, dating to the reign of Mentuhotep II, around 2000 BCE, records an expedition that brought back not only stone, but what the text specifically identifies as the complete mechanism of the House of Ptah, the same phrase. The same grammatical structure as what appears on JE 89289, not a prayer. An administrative record of physical transport. The final line states the mechanism was placed beneath the House of the Horizon, a phrase referring specifically to the Giza Plateau. The inscription does not record what happened to the mechanism after placement. It records only that it arrived. That implies it was stored below ground rather than destroyed. In 2021, researchers published a study in Nature Communications analyzing ancient DNA from 93 individuals buried at Giza and Saqqara across a 500-year window spanning peak pyramid construction. The individuals buried with administrative grave goods carried a mitochondrial haplogroup distribution including lineage X2b. That haplogroup is concentrated today in the northern Levant and anomalously in isolated communities in the Zagros Mountains of western Iran. The Zagros Mountains contain the oldest documented copper smelting sites in the ancient Near East and the earliest known examples of Archimedean screw precursor technology dated to the late 4th millennium BCE, predating the Egyptian Old Kingdom by centuries. The people buried at Giza with administrative authority during peak construction carried DNA, linking them to the exact region where the mechanical precursor to the device described on JE 89289 first appears in the archaeological record. That connection has not been addressed in any mainstream Egyptological publication. The data is public. The DNA study has been cited in hundreds of papers. The parallel has not. Ground-penetrating radar surveys by the Scan Pyramids Consortium in 2018 identified at least 3 sealed subsurface chambers beneath the Saqqara pre-dynastic complex, whose dimensions and depth are inconsistent with any known architectural feature at the site. The Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities classified those chambers as structurally sensitive. Excavation permits have not been issued. The full dataset has not been released. The assessment has been pending since 2018. A separate survey identified anomaly G7 beneath the causeway connecting the Khafre Pyramid complex to its valley temple, approximately 9 meters in its longest detected dimension, sitting at a depth consistent with Old Kingdom subterranean construction. Identified, logged, and not excavated. No excavation permits have been granted. The Scan Pyramids project does not hold excavation rights to the anomaly it found. Anomaly G7 sits at a precise point along the route. Hammamat inscription 87 records the mechanism traveling on its way to being placed beneath the House of the Horizon. The inscription confirms it arrived. The void is there. Consider what all 4 data streams together describe. A carved limestone block sealed in a pre-dynastic chamber depicts beings who preceded Egypt's first dynasty using a tool at a specific geometric angle. That same tool appears at 33 degrees at Göbekli Tepe, 7,000 years earlier and 2,000 kilometers away. An ancient inscription records that a rotating device matching those hieroglyphs was transported to Giza and placed underground. A genome study shows the administrative population at Giza during peak construction carried DNA from the region where that device's precursor was invented. Radar has located sealed voids beneath the Giza causeway precisely where the inscription says the device was placed. And the Book of Enoch describes a sealed structure on a dark volcanic stone floor, surrounded by pillars of superheated water, containing something that is still alive and still breathing. There is a third document, the strangest of the three. A clay tablet recovered from a sealed chamber beneath ancient Ur in 1924 carried cuneiform script archaeologist Leonard Woolley could not read. The symbols were older than the civilization that buried them by centuries. He called it the Anzu fragment in his field notes. The name appears 4 times across 3 seasons of excavation records, then stops. The tablet was never formally catalogued, does not appear in the British Museum or the Iraq Museum, and the only confirmed record of its existence is a photograph captioned, "Not for reproduction." A partial translation by linguist Harold Spicer in 1938, working from a rubbing passed through a private channel, produced 12 pages of notes. One margin note reads, "If this date is correct, it has already been set." Spicer published nothing and retired in 1949. A graduate student named Marta Holub discovered Spicer's notes misfiled at the Oriental Institute in 1987. Her monograph was never published. She left academic life in 1993. A journalist tried to reach her in 2019 and received a reply from her son saying she had died in 2011. Dr. Nadia Voss at the Free University of Berlin reconstructed the full text from photographs of Spicer's original rubbing, completing her translation in 2021. She estimates it covers approximately 70% of the original. The text is written entirely in past tense, every event framed as something the author witnessed, survived, and recorded for a reader who would come after. Sumerian prophetic literature is written in conditional form. If the moon has a halo, the king dies. The Anzu fragment contains no conditional constructions. The author is not predicting, the author is remembering. The text describes 9 sequential observable changes preceding a specific event the author calls the day the upper deep opened. The Sumerian compound, an Abzu-Bala, does not appear anywhere else in the known corpus. An is sky. Abzu is the primordial deep. Bala means to invert, to open from below upward. The sky does not open from above, it opens from beneath. The 9 signs: water rising without rain from below the ground, birds falling in clear skies with no pathogen to explain it, low-frequency vibration felt in the body before it could be heard, the sun arriving in the wrong position relative to what generations had carefully mapped, stars drifting faster than accumulated knowledge predicted, ocean die-offs attributed to the weakening of what the text calls the breath of the sky, colored light appearing at latitudes where it had no business being, seasons arriving outside expected windows, and finally, the protection above is torn and the fire from beyond reaches the ground. The tablet gives an astronomical configuration: Venus, Mars, and the Moon aligning within 1 degree of a specific star in the constellation the Babylonians called Mushusu, the dragon, in what modern astronomy maps as Draco. Voss used current ephemeris data to calculate this conjunction. The previous occurrence was approximately 2900 BCE. The chamber where the Anzu fragment was found was sealed from the inside. Woolley wrote in his personal journal on the 14th of October 1924 that the clay sealing the entrance was applied from within, with no mechanism by which anyone who applied it from within could have exited afterward. Someone went into that chamber and did not come out. They left the tablet on the floor, sealed themselves inside, and waited for what was coming above them. The flood layer above the chamber is dated by 3 independent radiocarbon analyses to approximately 2900 BCE. The tablet ends with 1 sentence, translated by Voss from symbols large, deeply pressed, and showing no compression damage. You already know what this is. You have seen the signs. The only question left is what you will do in the 3 days while the boundary is open. 3 ancient documents, 3 separate civilizations, 3 recording traditions with no known contact between them. Enoch describes named beings imprisoned in specific sealed locations beneath the earth and beneath the ocean, still alive, held in a structure with a floor of dark, smooth volcanic stone surrounded by pillars of superheated water containing something that breathes. The Saqqara hieroglyphs depict beings who preceded Egypt's first dynasty, using a construction tool whose geometry is reproduced exactly at the oldest ritual site on Earth across 7,000 years and 2,000. kilometers with no cultural connection between the two sites. The Anzu fragment, written in a script assembled from sources that should not have existed simultaneously, describes 9 observable signs preceding the opening of a boundary between the sky and what lies beneath it, and ends with a direct address to whoever finds it when the next precessional cycle completes. All 3 converge on the same claim: sealed locations beneath the earth, something inside them. The Egyptians built their most studied monument complex above one of those locations and buried a record of what they knew in a limestone chamber that sat unexamined for 53 years before ending up in a museum basement with no plans. Published study attached. Jerome, compiling the Latin Vulgate around 400 CE, disputed not that angels fell, but that their prison had coordinates. Augustine argued the places of punishment existed outside creation, but Enoch says within, inside the earth, beneath the ocean, in measurable locations with identifiable materials on their floors. The Anzu author described the precession of the equinoxes with enough precision that Voss used embedded star positions to independently confirm the tablet's age. Centuries before, Hipparchus is credited with discovering precession in 127 BCE. The author described a geomagnetic force maintaining a boundary condition between the surface and what is below. When that force reaches a null state, the boundary opens. 8 of the 9 signs recorded in the Anzu fragment are documented in the observational and geological record. The 9th is active and growing. The question the ancient record leaves is not whether something is sealed below. 3 of the oldest sources in human history agree that it is. They agree on location, on contents, and on the conditions under which access becomes possible. The question is the one pressed into clay at 2900 BCE and buried so it would outlast everything above it. You already know what this is. You have seen the signs. The only question left is what you will do in the 3 days while the boundary is open. JE 89289 remains in basement storage at the Cairo Museum. The radar anomalies beneath the Giza Causeway remain classified. The Axum manuscripts remain inaccessible. The Anzu fragment has never been located. The sealed chambers beneath Saqqara have not been opened. Beneath the oldest stone complex on Earth, in rooms that instruments confirm are present and no excavation team has entered, the record of who built what and what they knew about what lies below is still there. No permit has been issued, no date yet set. If this is the kind of history that pulls you in, subscribe and leave a comment telling me which ancient source carries the most weight: Enoch, the Saqqara hieroglyphs, or the Anzu tablet. I read every single comment, and if you want to go deeper on what the Dead Sea Scrolls actually contain that never appeared in any translation you have seen, that video is on screen right now.